Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video is about some smoothing tips and tricks that I thought I would make public because I have several tricks that I would like to share with you guys that I use to improve my roller coasters and to make them smooth. So the first thing we have to note when it comes to smoothing is that we have to go to our settings and go to our look ahead and smoothing. So our look ahead should be at a very minimum. 0.1 is the very minimum look ahead we can have. We cannot go to 0, unfortunately. So we have to go to 0.1, which is the minimum. And the reason being, this is how close the camera will be to the train. Therefore, the minimum look ahead means that the camera is stuck to the train and there's no shoving, there's no moving or anything that the user would consider unnecessary. And then obviously the right cam smoothing should be set to 0 to find any sort of jolts. Anything above 0.1, 0.25 is already hiding a little bit of jolts, which is why I use 0.25 for recording, because sometimes there's a few jolts that I simply cannot fix, and therefore 0.25 is a great way to hide these minor jolts, just so people, asterisks, Emerald 4, don't complain. But yeah, these are the settings that you should aim to have. I like my FOV at 55, that's up to personal preference, but this is important, that's important. Okay, that's my first tip for the day. Now, when we're working on rides, what I find ideal is to be able to use the reverse POV, well, the front mounted of course, but also the reverse POV and also the back row POV. So we go down here to the back row, and with certain things you will be able to find jolts. So if I load up one of my old rides, for example, I'm going to blur out this screen because nobody wants to see any of this. Let's say we will load up Hulk. So if we go on the back row for Hulk, I have my smoothing set to 0 right now, and we will be able to see certain things in which we missed out on a few jolts. So just wait for it to launch in a minute. Yeah, there we go. So as we can see, there's no jolts here. The train is absolutely smooth at the moment. This Cobra Roll is glossy smooth, good work asterisks, but then at one point we're going to see that the train is going to start, the train is going to start going through some jolts. And you can see from here on, yeah, there we go, there's a jolt. There's a great way to be able to find jolts in your track. There we go, there's another one, and another one. So sometimes the front view or the mounted will not display the jolts nearly as well as the back row POV, and also the rear mounted camera also does a great job of that. Yeah, you can see that right there. So this is another tip that you can use to be able to find imperfections in your profiling and in your track when you're building. Okay, so we're gonna go in a new track and we're gonna get a launch going of some sort. So I'm not gonna push it up or anything, this is just for demonstration purposes. It's not meant to be realistic, but the first thing you should do, or what I do anyways, when you are building and you want to fix jolts, get your track smooth, is to turn on any of the data combs seen in the stats in the top left. I usually do the vertical G one. It doesn't matter which one. It depends on the color of your terrain. So if your terrain looks reddish, some sort of terrain where you can't really see your comb, you just switch to the speed comb, which is this color, or you can switch to this one. Like, there's a variety of different colors that you can use. I usually just use this one out of muscle memory. But the reason this is because to fix jolts, we need to balance the curvature between pieces. So let's say, for example, we start here. I'm just going to push this up, for example, just like that, straight up. And now we're going to make another segment. So it's going to go straight up. So we can already see, let me just paste down. So we can already see that there's a slight imbalance in curvature here between these two nodes. So what we can do is go into our advanced. Actually, let me just write it for you guys and see how that looks from this perspective. Yep, you can see there's a tiny jolt there. So what we can do here is we can adjust our pitch here, and we will have a more balanced curvature here. So we can see it looks more round, it looks about the same. And we can adjust the weights as well. So they look sort of similar, say 4.7 on each side, and the curvature is really similar as well, then we're gonna have a smooth track. And now if we give it a check, we can absolutely see that the track is completely smooth. Like you saw that, like the transition is completely seamless. That's what we're aiming to get with our tracks. And if you can see, there's still a little bit of a jolt. You adjust it again until the jolt is gone. Unfortunately, this game is all about trial and error. You have to adjust the track until you get what you want. And then you might have also noticed that there is a jolt at the end of the launch, heading into that first piece. That's the next trick that I'm going to talk about, which is the transitions into the straight segments, or coming out of straight segments. So when we come out of a straight segment or go into a straight segment, we have to make sure that the two weights that align with the straight segment are on a straight line or somewhere close to a straight line, because that way the train will easily come off into this piece of straight track and then twist up, and then we can adjust that one, move it down. Okay, and this is just adjustment. Like we have to adjust this piece so that it smoothly transitions into the next one, and so on. And this process repeats for everything. And also, this thing with the curvature also applies for the yaw. So the yaw in the horizontal axis is also affected by this curvature. So if there's a jolt in a sideways turn or something like that, you need to adjust it using this method, or this is the way I do it anyway. So let's give it a try. Let's see how this works. You see, there's absolutely no jolts up to this vertical spike thing. There's absolutely no jolts coming out of that track. And that is because of the adjustments we did with the comb. You can still do it without the comb, but the comb is a really easy way to see it. Like the comb is easier to see rather than the rails or the track, especially B&M track, which isn't round, it's square. That's up to you, but personally I really like using these combs, not only for the purpose of seeing how many G's you're hitting, but also because of the smoothing. Okay, now the next thing we're going to talk about is airtime hills. So how to make an airtime hill smooth. So something I like to do with airtime hills is make a starting segment, which is this one, a middle segment, and then the hill itself. So this middle segment, we're going to keep the same pitch, and we're going to adjust the height of the hill. So that means that at the end of this segment, there's going to be, at the start of the segment, sorry, there's going to be a tiny bit twisting up, and then at the end, it's going to be a tiny bit twisting down. And that bit twisting up is connected to the piece before it. And like we said before, the curvature has to be matched. It has to be balanced. We can adjust the weights to balance that out. And we got ourselves the start of the airtime hill. Now we need the middle. I usually just do one piece for the middle, and that piece as well needs to sync up with the previous bit. And this also works for 0G rolls. 0G rolls, like you do the exact same thing except you're banking the pieces accordingly. And then we need symmetry. So with symmetry, we can look at the height positioning of each segment and then just replicate it. So for instance, this is at 7.3 in height. We can just adjust that to 7.3 and then match the pitch and just bring it down. So adjust the weights. Yeah, and then we should get a glossy smooth airtime hill with the transitions in and out. And it's also perfectly symmetrical, or well, near perfect symmetrical. And yeah, from here it's up to you what adjustments you want to do. Remember, if you want to add a trim brake, you just use the straight track tip from earlier. But that's how you would design an airtime hill. Okay, now when it comes to rolls and 0G rolls, it's preferable to use free banking. Never use strict banking when you're doing turns, even when you're banking from 0. Because you know, in software like No Limits 2, you have strict banking from 0 and it keeps it to 0. And if you don't add the strict banking, then that banking is all over the place. It's kind of the same with UC2. So let's say we start free banking here. Let's profile a 0G roll. This is going to turn out really bad because it's a really low inversion here. But let's say we're gonna go up to 50 degrees here, and then do a complete twist up to 310. Okay. So that looks all right, right? Okay. I know it's a really tight transition, but this is only for demonstration purposes. We can make that better. In fact, we can, like you can see over here, this is a really forced transition from the straight track. We can just set this to free. But the thing is, if you set this to free banking, you can see that the track tilts slightly to the left or counterclockwise or whatever you want to call that. So we're gonna have to move the banking here slightly. And this is really similar to what B&M is doing recently with their profiling. As you can see, this profiling looks a lot like modern B&M, if you like to do that. Otherwise, if you really like that strict banking thing, you can absolutely use that. But for smoothing, I think this is better, because you can adjust that to make smaller pieces, like before the 0G roll, and it'll end up being a smoother transition. Because this piece here, the first piece that goes into the roll, it's actually really long, but if you want that transition to be shorter, you absolutely can. You're gonna have more trouble fixing the jolts there, but still, I think it's a very effective way of smoothing out track. And this not only goes for 0G rolls or whatever you're doing, this goes for any bit of straight track with banking 0 going into bank track. Any inversion, anything, any turn. Okay. What else have we got? Okay, so another trick I would like to give, another tip I would like to give to you guys is avoiding using long segments. So let's say I've seen some people do stuff like this, for example. So let's say you want to make an airtime hill, you split it into 2, extend the weights here, and then just push it up like that. This is not something I would consider optimal, because then in POVs like this, it'll start bouncing a lot. This is why you have to use the 0.25 smoothing when you're recording, but at the same time, this is not optimal, especially for smoothing, because then if you want to match up the curvatures, like we said at the start of the video, it's going to be really difficult, because these weights are going to be huge. Therefore, if you're matching it up with smaller weights, there's going to be a big imbalance. Like it will be difficult to remove jolts, and it also just looks bad from the 0 smoothing POV. So I would advise using smaller pieces, not tiny pieces now, not like 2-meter method from Panic Coaster, but I would advise using smaller pieces and not these huge segments instead. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. That's as much as I'm gonna give for today. These are my smoothing tips that I use in my roller coasters for my channel, for my own amusement, pleasure, whatever. And I hope you find this video useful. Share this with everybody who plays UC2 so that they can learn how to smooth out rides and fix jolts and get realistic shaping on their roller coasters. Peace out, and thanks for watching. Cheers.